helps you that you can enjoy, that you can tool around with. So I'm going to talk about food truck tracking in Slack. And because I love alliteration, I've subtitled it Providing Prescient Postings for Peckish Pythonistas. So let's get started. So just to set some boundaries, this talk will not cover aggregating food truck locations. That's a whole other thing to take care of, and I want to kind of give people like an entry-level introduction essentially into this subject. I also want to cover parsing locations from tweets using NLP. If a food truck is tweeting, I'm at 5th and I Street, you've got a lot of domain knowledge you can bring into it. And once again, totally interesting, maybe something for a different talk, but I'm kind of saying it's outside the scope of this presentation. I also want to cover using your collection of James Bond gadgets to affix small transponders to moving vehicles at dangerously high speeds. That's just unsafe, and I don't think anyone would forgive me if I got someone hurt. What I will cover is using Python to connect consistent services. Now, it sounds really simple, but to me that's one of the great things about Python. It's simple yet powerful. We can use Python to glue many different things together in very terse, simplistic fashions that can yield great results. So, before we're doing an investigation or any kind of attacking a problem, we actually have to have a problem. So, this is my problem statement. Developers need food.
Woo!
Food, yeah. And beer. Beer. Food comes from trucks. If you're fortunate enough to live or work in the DC, Northern Virginia area, you should get used to seeing a long line of food trucks during lunch hour. The other part of the problem, though, is truck information is very poorly aggregated. You maybe maintain connections to a whole bunch of Twitter accounts, and before you know it, info security Taylor Swift has gone in a tweet storm, and you've drowned out all of your food truck information, your precious food truck information. So, solution: food truck tracking sites, right? There are these great third-party sites that collect all this stuff for you, but they suck. They look like they were made in the late 90s. All they're missing is the GeoCities or Angel Fire Band. Only nice kids.
It's like it's scorpion.
Yeah. They're kind of painful to look at. If your eyes are bleeding, I'm sorry. On top of that, their entire model is, they've been designed by people who don't know design, which is great. I mean, they're putting something out there, but it takes a lot of clicks sometimes to get to what you want to see. There's no way to, once you've gone through all the clicking and scrolling, to return to where you are with a deep link or anything like that. So there's a lot of back and forth there. And in my office, I observed the unique problem of my coworkers and I were spending all this time going to the site and asynchronously hunting these things out and then coming back and realizing, hey, you have a food truck that I didn't have, and trying to resolve all that. And we realized that in the half hour or hour leading up to lunch, that was really eating up all the time, causing a lot of conflict. Yeah. Or Wi-Fi goes down, and then it's just what are we doing? Walking outside to the food truck?
Looking with our eyes? What?
Yeah. Ugh, work. So, kind of taking a slight tangent, here I'm also talking about Slack. Slack is a web-based messaging platform, kind of like a persistent hosted IRC. So, like I said, it's a web-based messaging client, and since it's persistent, unlike IRC, people can just be signed off when they come back. They get to see the entire buffer of things they've missed. It's also handy because you can get non-technical people on it without having to really worry. A similar kind of thing would be HipChat, which I've heard mentioned at DC Python before as well. What's also really nice is it has a lot of collaborative features out of the box. That includes the ability to share code snippets and comment on things, or share documents or images or videos and have them embed. So it's a very rich way to communicate in organizational units. The other advantage is all of our developers use it. Some more than others, but we have really awesome discussions, and it's a great way to kind of contain this information for, oh, you're on XYZ project, this is our Slack channel, and you have these great conversations that spring out of that. And important to us, it's extensible. since it's web hosted, there's kind of this mentality of, well, it should be able to tie to everything. So in our case, for example, we've got our continuous integration server piping out build failure messages, not very often, but build failure messages in our channels. So once again, it's nice being able to get hooks into common parts of your workflow. So can we take our love for food trucks and this tool that everyone's staring at when they're not coding and make something awesome? So here's a potential solution. So a user asks Slack for nearby food trucks. Slack queries a web service or any sort of third party for food trucks in the area. And Slack then publicly displays the results in a channel or to a group of people, so everyone sees that notification. So listing food trucks. Let's hit the API. Sadly, there is no API. It's just the way it is. So no problem. We can scrape this information. How many of you are familiar with scraping? Pretty much most of you. So scraping is basically extracting content from just plain old HTML or any kind of source document, like a PDF file or something. For the sake of this, that's the best thing. So before we continue, though, it's important that everyone remembers that you're scraping sites that other people are hosting. You have to be respectful of them. Make sure you're not, it's very easy for your scripts to be out of control and just hit a site like once every millisecond and you're taking it down and you're getting an angry call from someone. Or, yeah, easily trackable. The other things would be, for example, a lot of you have probably seen like sites that mirror Stack Overflow questions. And they put a whole bunch of ads next to it and monetize that, which is really skeezy. So let's try to be above board here and like be a good ethical member of the internet community. So scraping with Python, I really see it as a binary kind of thing. There are two ways to do it. One is if you're doing a really serious scraping job where you have to have a distributed cluster of scrape nodes and you need fancy things like caching, image downloading, encoding and stuff, use Scrapey. Scrapey is awesome. It's a great framework for web scraping on a very large scale. However, for everything else, there are all these other smaller frameworks, but I find it's a lot easier, and I like getting close to the metal in this case, to basically write your own. And writing your own isn't as daunting as it may sound. As you can see, as we'll see soon, it's actually pretty straightforward. So, there are really two main components to a custom scraper. Requests, which is, out of curiosity, how many of you have used urllib2 in Python? How many of you love using it? Yeah. Requests provides a really awesome uniform API over all of the ugliness of the Python HTTP like networking libraries. It's got I think it's frozen the API, and it just makes life so much easier. It's one of those things I always take for granted until I actually have to go back and use the old way, and it's painful. The other thing is Beautiful Soup. It's a Python library that extracts content from markup, be it HTML or XML. The reason you want to be using Beautiful Soup to extract from HTML is there's a joke, which I hope many of you know. It's, oh, I want to extract something from HTML. That's my problem. So I'll use regex. Now you've got two problems. So never use regex for parsing HTML. If you take anything away, don't do it. You're going to have a bad time. So our first request. So what I have here is a URL for that mind-bogglingly ugly website I pulled up earlier. And so what I'm just doing is I'm pulling a request. I'm saying, hey, request, get me the contents of that URL, and print it out. Really, really straightforward. And what do we get? We get a list of food trucks. This is slightly more readable, actually. Sad world. So we've got this markup. Okay, well, like I said, don't use regex. So now we're going to go into, let's throw into Beautiful Soup. So Beautiful Soup, not too crazy, right? We just pull in Beautiful Soup, we give it the actual content of our page, and we tell it, hey, find me all list item tags. These are the LI tags. So So what Beautiful Soup will do is it'll say, hey, li tag, li tag, li tag, not li tag, and it will actually just pull that out for you. And then you can loop over it. It returns an iterable collection, and you can print it out. So if you run it, you get a nice new line delimited list of food trucks from it. And then, because we want to make this reusable, we can combine it into a function, and that is the entirety of what we need to do. So if I were to, so I've got get food trucks there. If I were to do get food trucks, I need to be in my virtual environment. Voila. That's the same code, we just pulled it down. Really straightforward. So, moving on. Oh wait, before I continue, anyone? Yeah, it's really short, right? It's all impressive. So, slacking off. Let's integrate with Slack. It's pretty easy. So there are two main parts of the Slack workflow. The first is that you tell Slack that you want something. So Slack uses things called slash commands, which if you're familiar with IRC, it's a / command syntax to invoke an external function. So we're going to use a slash command to invoke this script that we're running. And then the script will then somehow automatically get text back to Slack. And then Slack will be responsible for displaying to users. So, however, to get this script to work, we need to put it on the internet. So there are two other components of this. One is Flask, which is a great web framework in Python. It does a really good job of kind of stepping out of the way. It's very lightweight. It's not like Django, which you might choose out of the box. Django is great for a lot of things, but not for something as simple as this. A lot of overhead. And the other is Heroku, which is a software as a service platform. I'll touch on that a little later to avoid kind of going on two different tangents. So, this is all we need to do. All we need to do to create our web service. We need to bring in Flask. We need to create an app object from our Flask constructor, and we have our old function there, the one we ran earlier. And all we do is tell Flask, hey, when someone asks for the resource /trucks, that is, if I go to arusani.net/trucks, execute this function and return the output to the person requesting it. And all this function is doing is it's returning a comma delimited list of the food trucks that we had already collected. This is all you need to do to get a Flask web app going. Like, I could execute this if I had a main state, and it would return. I could run locally in ping. So, getting on to the Slack side, Slack offers you the ability to, a nice web interface for customizing all this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell Slack, hey, I want to create a food trucks command. I'm going to give it a URL eventually. But what's cool down here is you get this security token. Another rule of thumb, if you come away with a second thing for tonight, it's if you're putting something on the internet, you better lock it down. Otherwise, you're going to have a bad time. So with the security token, and don't worry, all these tokens are invalid. I made sure I took screenshots and then reset them. But the security token is essentially a shared secret between Slack and your web application. And so what we're going to do is we're going to bring this. In addition to the token, though, we have other things like a username. So you can say, "Hey, Aaron asked for food trucks." I'm going to reply with a snarky message directly addressing Aaron, and then give him the food trucks. You get the command, you can pass parameters, anything you really want out of the function. So, all I'm doing here now is I'm integrating this security token. So I'm saying, hey, here's the token. I'm hard-coding it. You don't want to hard-code it. You can put it in your environment or something. And then you can say, hey, if the token that I get in the request doesn't match what I'm asking for, what I've been told is truth, I'm going to reject the person and say they can't access this. You can do other things. If you're worried about malicious attackers, you can serve them a 50 megabyte file and get download each time they try to attack you. I've done that with WordPress instances, and it's awesome. And that's the same code earlier to return a comma-separated list of food trucks. And don't worry, all this code and stuff, it'll be available in GitHub afterwards. So if people need boilerplate stuff, they can feel free to borrow it. So now we've got this web app made, and we've got a scraping service working. All we have to do now is put it online for Slack to get. So like I said, Heroku is a hosted software as a service platform. That basically means you give Heroku your code, you tell it some characteristics about your code, like, oh, this is a Python application, this uses a unicorn server, I want this number of worker processes, and it will basically execute and run it, and you don't have to worry anything about hardware, about network connectivity, it's all there. The other reason I like Heroku is it allows you to scale your product pretty well if you've designed it with that in mind. You can just, if you need to accommodate more traffic, you can add more nodes to your cluster. If you need something fancy like, oh, I need a Redis queue going on, you can drop in with a push of a button, deploy one, and have it connected instantly. It's really good. It can get to be pretty expensive, so I only see it good for prototyping, but I enjoy it because they've got a really good free tier. You can do a lot with it. And the other nice thing is it uses Git for code deployment. So I can do a Git push and have a new version of my code deployed and running on my cloud server in 2 minutes. So you have that very tight feedback loop, which is great for development. So I've said all that. So there's a little more boilerplate required for Heroku. I have to get a web server installed, so I'm going to use Unicorn. I have to capture my requirements for my virtual environment, so I'm creating a file. I'm defining my Python version. You all should be using Python 3 by now. I'm also then creating a proc file, which basically tells Heroku how to execute my code. So I'm saying, go to my food trucks file, and the app object is our Flask with G input. So with that, you basically register Heroku with your Git account and push it out, and Heroku will give you a URL. That URL then goes back into that configuration screen I showed you earlier, and that's how Slack knows to send that / command. So if we give it a whirl, we should see something like this. So I've got an instance going on here. So I'm going to say food trucks, and it's going around. So what I see here is